Welcome everyone to Inspired by, powered by TAG Network Midlands. Today I am joined by Alex Cole. Now Alex Cole has a lot of titles. He is CEO of TIN Ventures, a founding member of the Race Equalities Task Force. He's an RSA fellow and he's also the non-exec director of Birmingham Tech. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you're obviously a very, very busy man. So where should we start? Should we go to the very beginning of your career? Do you want to tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
Yes, I'm 58. I better fess that up now. So it's quite a long career. So I was born in 1964, and I started off basically not liking anything but sport. So I thought I was going to be a footballer or I don't know, something to do with sport. It didn't work out that way. My dad was in the RAF, so I grew up around the RAF. So I lived in Singapore. So that was my first school. And so my career effectively has gone almost alongside the RAF and all my kind of formative years. So I traveled a lot and what I'm trying to give you a sense of is my life changed all the time. And you'll see why that matters later. So at the point where I kind of came back from Singapore, we were back in Oxford and on an RAF base for a few years, and then we moved to Jamaica when I was 9. My dad left the RAF, and so I came back when I was 13. Left school, and my dad decided that we were all going to be able to join one of the forces. So I was taken as soon as I'd finished my O levels. I was taken on my GCSEs. New money to an RAF state careers office, and I did all the tests, and unfortunately I passed. I tried to fail them, but I didn't. So I became what was a satellite communications engineer, and did my training at RAF Locking, which was in Weston-super-Mare. So again, more change, more traveling up and down. Did lots of different things. I left the RAF when I was about 24. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but most people kind of left the RAF and went to work for British Telecom at the time, because I was in avionics telecommunications, that sphere. I just found that really boring and I didn't really want to do that anymore. So I wanted to, and I walked into a recruitment agency and they said, you know what you'd be good at, Alex, it's selling. And I thought, oh, of course I had no idea what that meant. So I did some sales training, and I got into business development through that. And the idea of that was really trying to convey complicated subjects like digital or technology or computers at the time, and explain it in a way that made people buy things, which apparently suited me really well. So I was very good at that. And started working for what we would probably call original equipment manufacturers, so OEM people. And they were companies like Canon and, all those kinds of some office machinery type companies and publishing companies. So I ended up working for the Daily Mail Group, and then ended up in the BBC. And at that point, how old was I then? 38. So that was 20 years ago. Feels like yesterday to me, but that became the point where I kind of took a different direction. So I started getting involved in project management and program management, and I became a trained project and program manager in Prince 2. And that really, really did suit me, because all of my traveling, all of the change, and I became a specialist in change management, which is why I said all those different changes made sense, because the BBC at the time was changing lots of things. So they were building new buildings, changing their structure. And I then started getting involved in operations management and consulting and advisory work. And effectively then moved into consulting with Capita and Capgemini. And my last corporate role was at Capgemini, where I left in 2015. So that brings us kind of up to date. And I then became a new thing called a social entrepreneur. And I'll pause there. That's probably enough for me.
Yeah, just a few things there. You've had a crazy amount of career changes there, and even just traveling around so much as a child, like being able to flex between different countries and different sort of social groups and all that kind of stuff. You can see where your career path has led you into those different kind of roles completely. Completely, yeah. But let's get on to the social entrepreneur side of things. So for the people watching that don't know what a social entrepreneur is, do you want to explain a little bit about what it means?
Yeah, so I suppose I was always entrepreneurial. I guess what that means is that you can operate in a I suppose a phase of an organization where you're looking at all the different challenges and you're helping them structure and organize it. So it becomes operationally safe, if you like. So the change space I worked in was always meant that I was looking at solving problems, but for commercial reasons. So you had to keep the company going. A social entrepreneur, the driver is less about money, but about impacting social challenges. So you're working so the way you score, and the way I certainly score what I'm doing and the impact of what I'm doing, isn't in terms of how much money I make, it's how many problems I solve and how do I make people's lives better. So for me, it's an entrepreneurial, it's a purpose-led entrepreneurial role rather than a profit-led.
What was the deciding factor for you to go down that path? Did something happen that made you want to follow that path?
Two things happened. Well, probably three. Yeah. My children started asking me very tough questions. Questions about money and career and what they should be doing, because they were going to get into that age at the time where they were starting to be asked what do they want to do for a living, and they asked me why did I do what I did, and the answer wasn't very nice. I thought, I kind of was answering the question, but they just said, "Well, you're doing it for money, Dad," and I thought I probably am, and I felt like that wasn't all of who I was. My dad died around that time. So that was a big one. Really made me rethink my life. He was only 69, wasn't expecting it. So it really did change my whole focus and triggered a whole different route for me. I felt really about legacy became a real focus for me, and again, answering the questions from my children in a way that was more positive than just I'm doing it for the money. And the third thing was I got seconded in my last year, towards the end of my time at Capgemini, to Business in the Community, which is one of now King Charles's charities, but it was a business charity. And they were running a program where, and that secondment meant I was spending time in job centres, in schools, in lots of places where I realised the future of work was looking really bleak for my children and for lots of people. So I became really obsessed with solving some of the challenges, which I saw was really about things not being joined up, not being structured, not being organised, and people just, talking about money all the time rather than people's lives, and those are real people. Anyway, so yes, I just felt super motivated and did the crazy thing and left my corporate job and my comfortable life and just dived straight in, which is kind of what I've always done.
Yeah, I think sometimes you need the brutal honesty of kids to kind of put things into perspective so that you don't. They will always find a way to shine a light on whatever you're doing. Okay, so with TIN Ventures then, how did you start putting it together? Did you have a clear idea of where it was going to go, or how did it become what it is today?
Yes, I didn't have a clear idea. It's had 3 iterations, and it's become a series of ventures. So it arrived at being TIN Ventures from the original concept, which was just really to help people get back into work who were long-term unemployed. And I created a program called DigiSheds. So it was like a digital shed where people were fixed and were engaged or interested in digital skills. So it felt like a clever name until you had to say it really fast, especially if you'd had a drink. Couldn't do that, but at the time it made obvious sense, and that DigiSheds program was funded by the Department for Work and Pensions in 2014, and it's still running now, and that was the focus originally. DigiSheds then turned into, I left Capgemini and I said, well, what am I going to be doing? And I said, I just want to think about innovation. And one of the grads that I was working with wrote that down and said, well, that's like tin, Alex. And I said, oh, that's clever. Let's write that down. And they said, what are you going to be doing? Well, it's going to be a smart social business, I said. And they said, oh, so TIN Smart Social. And I said, sure, that's great. Register that. And I thought they were just going to register TIN Limited, and they registered TIN Smart Social. So the original iteration was called TIN Smart Social, which was a consulting business, and it basically just took DigiSheds and ran with it. What I got involved in, because I started getting involved in lots of things, because there's lots of problems to solve, I started getting much more interested in helping other people become entrepreneurs, if possible, social entrepreneurs. Obviously obsessed with skills and the future of work. And then I also started getting really involved in social mobility around and how sustainability and the green agenda could really turbocharge a number of the challenges we're having right now. We have to fix those things. And I just thought it was a great opportunity. So I'm very excited about innovation, entrepreneurship, and the future of work. And that's what TIN Ventures is focused on.
Brilliant. So, like you said, there's so many issues there. How do you decide where to start? How do you figure out what to do each day?
Well, it's like anything. It's a puzzle. You kind of try to put together some pieces. The pieces I realized were connected was and again, my children were helpful in this. If you're leaving school, you've gone through school in doing subjects. They're not connected. You're just passing exams, and then you're suddenly thrust into the world of work. And they say, well, forget all those different streams. Here are just some problems to solve, and you need to put all that together. And nobody talked to them about that. And we've now started calling that employability, which means how do you stop thinking in little boxes, and now start solving problems for real. So I put together a program, and so that's what I started fixing, is what's the join between school and the different type of thinking, and what's the gap between what a corporate or an employer is looking for. They call that the digital skills gap, or they call that the skills gap. But for me, it's about employability or thinking differently. So that's where I started. And I wanted to make that equitable, because lots of different people need more help than others. For lots of different reasons. They may have learning difficulties, they may have challenges at home, they may not have access to digital tools, or just they can't eat, they're not eating properly, their health isn't right. There's all sorts of things that you have to understand before you can talk to somebody about learning or work about their life. So yeah, that was my focus.
I imagine a lot of your skills you would have picked up from your childhood of traveling around would have really helped there with the listening side of things as well.
Yeah, 100%. It became, I identified with so many different things, and all of the challenges I had with making friends, every few years, new place, new opportunity, new challenge. So it became, I really enjoyed the conversations with people, and I do like listening to people talk about their life. I don't really like doing that myself, obviously, but I'm here. But the point is, I really think if we understand people's starting position, it makes it much easier to help them to get to where they want to go. And really what you're looking for is to help them to get some balance in their life. So it's never too happy or too sad. It's just kind of they're in a good place and they have opportunities. So yeah, that's my focus.
Okay. And is there any set criteria for the type of people you help? How do you find them? Do you ever get any pushback from them that maybe they don't really want the help to start with?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. It's multi-layered. I find the kinds of people, they kind of find me now, but the easiest place obviously is job centres. There are lots of different places where people who are in a challenging position go to. So community centres, community groups, job centres, youth centres, not many of those anymore. The Prince's Trust, lots of places, universities, colleges, all the people that don't succeed in universities and colleges, and most people don't think about them, the ones that didn't even get in. What happens to them? They just kind of fall up by the wayside. What I do helps to pick those people up rather than discard them and turn them into bitter people who are not happy. help them to realize that actually they're just as good as everybody else. They just didn't fit that particular criteria at that particular time. So yeah, and the other question you asked was, do you get pushback from them? 100%. Many of those people have been through some bad experiences. So it is about listening. It is about saying, okay, I get it. You've had to tell this story 100 times. It's not ended well. But if you trust me, I think I can help. And many times that is a personal commitment from me. They're not interested in anybody else or anything else. They just, if I say so, then they'll trust me. And so I obviously that's hard to scale, but I've worked with some really good people, and there are lots of organizations doing some brilliant stuff, but it's just not connected. So I'm just trying to connect the dots in lots of ways. So yes, we get pushback, but we can overcome that usually by just showing that we care.
Yeah, I think trust must be such a huge part of what you do, having to build that relationship and build up that trust with whoever you're working with. It must be quite hard to switch off at the end of the day sometimes, maybe.
Yes, I mentioned my children a number of times. They help me with that. I got grandchildren now as well, so I've got 3 grandchildren. So I'm very much a family man. I've got a West Indian. My parents are Jamaican, so I've got a West Indian culture. We're very family oriented. We like food, so lots of stuff happens around the dinner table and around food. So I do like to spend time just unplugging and just doing normal things. Normal things help me to kind of get back to myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine a lot of the people that you're helping don't have that kind of network. So yeah, being able to
Right.
be able to have that is a huge privilege, really, isn't it? But yeah, you don't necessarily think about that often. Okay, so what does a typical day look like for you then? Because you must be all over the place.
Yeah, and by design, I suppose. I was literally talking about that just now. Yeah, so I am literally and I suppose emotionally and physically all over the place. So I do my typical days. I get up. I don't know, wake up probably 6:37. I like to read for an hour. Depending on my day, I might be leaving the house at that time and getting on a train or getting in my car to get somewhere. More so now as we come out of lockdown and COVID, traveling much more again. But yeah, I like to read, like to prepare my mind. I'm very organized, as you can imagine, from the Air Force and my training and just traveling around a lot. So I like things to be I know what I'm doing, but I love being prepared, and I like it all to be very natural. So I do the work, pre-work, in terms of knowing what I'm doing, and then I just execute. And I tend to go to lots of different events. Some of those are really just to keep learning and to keep connected, but you meet lots of useful and interesting people. I then do my day is usually structured into probably half of my day is literally delivering programs. So delivering training programs, leadership programs, delivering, working with entrepreneurs and innovators. That's the bit I love. Just kind of getting my feet wet. And then the other half of the day is really just, as I said, events and spending time just thinking. I like to reflect. I like to spend time thinking and just what I used to get told off for at school, just gazing into space. I can do that now. And actually, it's quite productive. So I like doing that. And I like coming up with ideas.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders don't give themselves or schedule enough time for thinking and creativity, do they? It's something that always gets pushed aside, I think. But if you give yourself that time and space to be able to have those moments, you're going to be such a better leader for it, aren't you?
I think it helps me to lead. It helps me to be a better person, to be more centered and emotionally intelligent if I understand myself better.
Yeah, and I think it gives you more time to be more emotionally intelligent and compassionate for others as well, because you've got that space from whatever the situation was. Always super helpful. So you mentioned that you are traveling a lot more since COVID. I imagine during COVID you would have been incredibly busy with the work that you're doing, because everyone was not only losing their jobs or being put on furlough, but also everyone was isolated from each other as well. So how has COVID affected what you do? What sort of trends have you seen since then?
Yes, well, it has done in a really, it was a horrible period for lots of people for many reasons, but it did accelerate the thinking about a lot of the things I've been talking about and I've mentioned. So it accelerated thinking about the future of work, and that and that there's an opportunity for people to work from home and have a better work-life balance. So having the opportunity to think and to connect the dots and get to connect with people in a way that didn't require lots of traveling was really helpful. People starting to realize the potential for people to burn out and to be working so hard that their mental health starts to suffer. That I was talking about that for years. That accelerated. So it did accelerate a lot of things that I've been talking about. But as you mentioned, yes, I was much busier, and I spent a lot of time just listening to people again, and I probably use that word a lot. I'm trying to understand what the changes will mean for them and how work needs to change, how we operate. Of course, we pivoted to digital. A lot of my programs before were face-to-face. They were, you talked about trust, very hard to create trust online. So, and a lot of the employability that we were providing and what we were supporting people with required them to turn up every day, get out of bed, get out of their house. Sometimes it was the only thing they were doing that week. That meant they were meeting people. So it was really, really important. So that was quite difficult to create the same, and we still haven't been able to create the same level of impact that we have before. So that has been a challenge, and that continues to be a challenge. But we have been able to reach many more people. So we've refined the programs. We've started to stretch them across different sectors, and I do think people are now understanding that learning, and that phrase lifelong learning, has become normal. People just realize I've got to be learning about things all the time. So the fact there are lots of courses and lots of available opportunities to learn, people are much more open to that now. And I've been really, I've become quite obsessive about what I call democratizing digital, which is creating opportunity for people to benefit from the digital work and digital job roles, without them having to go through 4 years of a degree or having to having their dad or their parents knowing somebody. How can we get people in at the front, the ground floor end, to get excited about digital? Because as we're seeing with AI and automation and VR, there's so many jobs that people are just making them up now. So we need lots of people to get it. So I do think that opportunity, and I think that then leads me to the other thing I've been focused on, which is giving people confidence through certification. So I'm a real advocate of digital badges and democratizing digital through what I call stackable micro credentials or digital badges, where if somebody does something and does a piece of training for even a few weeks, you can give them a digital badge which gives them some confidence, which then conveys a signal of their competence and their capability to somebody who they're potentially going to work for, or the next course they're doing. And my ambition is, if you could stack all those badges together over years, eventually it's recognized by a university or a degree, an awarding body, that suddenly a degree drops through your door. And imagine, if 5 years from now you were in a really bad place 5 years before, and then suddenly you had a degree for all the little things that you did and the things that you thought were inconsequential, but you were awarded a badge for. I think that's social mobility in action. That's kind of just, that changes lives.
Yeah, you don't always think about things like rewards, certificates and badges, but actually it's something I'm learning at the minute, having small children, is that if you do tell someone they're doing a great job, that it does really boost their confidence, and you do find that it creates more momentum in what they're doing, doesn't it? And if a lot of people haven't had anyone believing in them for a while, I imagine those little things mount up and gradually build and build and build, and you can see a real change in the person as well.
It's everything you said. It's about trust and confidence, and usually if you ask people, they need to do that for themselves first. So they need to trust themselves, and they need to be confident in themselves. And we're asking people to do that as if it's easy, with all the challenges that are going on. So having these little signals of goodness, these little signals of actually I did okay. You know, when, as you said, if you look back and then 6 months from now you got 10 of those, you know, it's easier for me to say to you, well, I think you're pretty good. I think you've done well there. And it's hard to push back and say, well, no, I'm not very good. I'm not worth anything, Alex, because I haven't got a job. I think you're okay. You're going in the right direction. It's much easier, as you said. It's very obvious in children, but we're all just big children. We all want to be recognised and patted on the back, I think, for just doing things that I think potentially people just ignore. So yeah, I think it's really important, super important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're currently in a cost of living crisis. How is that affecting what you're doing right now?
It affects in a different way to COVID. It's affecting everyone, and me probably more so on the basis that this is something almost invisible, but it's like a clamp. It's like a pressure that's everywhere. It's changed the way I have to operate, because I cannot. You just know that everything that we used to do, and I can feel it. I can see it. You know, everything that cost me this much, all my costs have gone. You know, up and up and up. So I imagine, if you can imagine, I'm sure you can, that I'm operating a lot of things on a shoestring. I'm trying to do, beg from here and borrow, beg from Peter and pay Paul. I'm not sure they use that phrase anymore, but anyway, I'll use it still. So these costs make a real difference, these challenges. And of course, people, I mentioned to you that people, once they're struggling, if they're struggling, really hard for them to learn and to be positive and to have this mental attitude that they want to, everything is possible, when literally are struggling to eat or heat their house or just to feed their children. These are things that trump everything else. I don't know why I've used that word, because that takes you down a different road. But anyway, yeah, that overcomes everything. So this cost of living crisis has really changed people's mentality. It is a pressure. You have to almost acknowledge it before you start anything. I've had to do that. I've built in probably 15 minutes before every conversation to talk to people about how are they. Even this conversation, you and I would have just spoken about just how are we doing? How are you doing? Because you cannot assume that people are fine. And once you start unlocking it, so it's real. It's a massive pressure. What really disappoints me is the greed of the companies that have benefited. Utility companies, the oil and gas companies, and I'm hoping that we when we come out of it, and where we can, we make those companies pay. We change some of our lives and some of our buying habits to make sure that those companies don't take people for granted and can't benefit in the same way in the future. We can't count on the government to do that, because I think they're just as bad, but I don't want to get political about it. But the point is, it's pretty obvious who's doing well and why they're not passing those savings on, and still talking about the war and Brexit and all those kind of things. Okay, nobody's buying that. Yeah, I'll leave it there before I start.
No, you had some really interesting points there. I think, like you said, with checking in with people and making the time to have that sort of connection moment where you are just checking in on them and seeing how they're doing, that seems to be missing so much, not just in what you're doing, but in a lot of workplaces at the minute. I feel like a lot of leaders are really struggling with having any kind of emotional intelligence and checking in on their teams, and it's why so many people are burning out at the minute. So yeah, it's a big issue all around, isn't it?
I think so. I think it's something that's underestimated. We're hearing, I think it was Mental Health Awareness Week this week or last week. I don't like these ideas of a week, Black History Month. Okay, so we're just going to we're going to focus on that for a month, and we're just going to talk about that for a week. No, we need to talk about it all the time. So I 100%, I just can't understand if people power your business, which they clearly do. You're not checking. It's like getting into a car and not bothering to check the oil or check the tires, or just, you don't put any petrol in it. Why would you do that? You wouldn't do it. You're probably more zealous about that than you are on checking on people. And humans are far more complicated than a car. So anyway, as I said, soapbox moment over.
It's all good. Okay, so let's move on from that then. What do you love most about what you do?
Oh, that's easy. I love people starting to recognize their power, stepping into their power, the knowledge that they are more than they thought. And the fact that I can be helpful in that in some way is so rewarding. But you just stand back and just watch them do what they do, because people are amazing. So when you can unlock somebody's power and just unlock their light and give them the opportunity to shine, wow, there's nothing better than that. There's no money amount, there's no amount of money I've ever earned, no deal I've ever done that is much more powerful than that. So I love that.
Yeah. Do you tend to stay in touch with the people that you've helped, or are there any sort of success stories that you're particularly proud of?
I stay in touch with some of them. I try not to do that. I learned that quite early on, not to. I used to stay in touch with a lot. There are two that come to mind. The very first person I helped, is still there. I'm not sure I want to say her name. Obviously it's a lady because I've just spilled the beans there. But and he was she was had a really tough opportunity. I was mentoring in a job center. The DigiShares program, actually, she created it because of the conversations I had with her, and she'd actually applied to Capgemini and didn't get an interview. And I went back and checked what happened to her application, because I was quite senior then, so I was able to go back and, well, what happened here? And then we helped her reapply because there was she actually just didn't get through the first phase because she'd made a mistake on the form. So we got her to reapply. We just kind of coached her a little bit. And I was super proud of the fact that she joined Capgemini in one of the toughest areas to do. And she'd never been anywhere. She'd been in care. She'd done a whole bunch of things, and she'd never been out of the country. She had to get a passport. But her very first assignment was in Sweden at a well-known telecommunications company. I won't say who they are either. And that was her first assignment, and it was just amazing to tell her. She just telling me she's at the airport, she's just about to get on a plane, and yes, so super excited. So that stayed with me, that story. And there was one other, and it was in Birmingham actually. We moved the program to Birmingham because I was living here and kind of just felt that Birmingham had a better opportunity for us to make an impact than London, because I was in London initially. And I went to a youth centre and met with a parent of a young boy who said that he had learning difficulties, but was really interested in IT and would love to get involved, and she just pleaded to me, could he join the program? And he was autistic and on the spectrum. And I said, yes, that's fine. And she said, are you sure? And I said, no, absolutely. I said, but I need to meet him. So she brought him to meet me, and she said, "Wait," because she was saying, "I'm not sure he'll leave the house," but he came to meet me. He was super brave, and he came to meet me. And I asked him, "Would he? Does he want to join the program?" I told him a bit about it. He said, "No, yes, absolutely." I said, "But and we shook hands, and I said, "So you're going to stick with it?" And he said, "I will definitely, Alex." He was late every day, stuck with it, and he was working in McDonald's, I think, at the time, part time. And there were 5 people that got taken by quite a large company in Birmingham. There were offers to all 5 of these young people, and he was one of those 5, and he's still there. He's been there for 5 years. I said to them, he will be the most committed. It was just a massive. I mean, just to watch his mother and him and the way that he's benefited, it was just amazing. So yes, I stay in touch with some people, but I find it emotionally quite challenging to be too involved.
Yeah, it must be. But like you just mentioned there, like you made a big impact on that one boy's life, but obviously that would have like fed back to the mother, the rest of the family. So that sort of continual cycle of positivity is always good to hear, for sure. Cool. Okay. So you obviously have to deal with a lot of different stakeholders, you deal with a lot of different people. How do you plan networking into what you do? Is that one of your priorities?
Yeah, so I was mentioning before, meeting people, and I suppose the phrase is networking, but it really to me is about connecting with people and just learning. So I build that in. I probably go to an event, at least 3 events a week. So, and I try not to have cycles of events, because I try to find things where I literally am learning things. Once you get known, though, I don't think I've ever gone to an event, even if it's in the middle of nowhere, that I've not known someone. So someone come, oh, hey, Alex, what are you doing here? So you do get to know people, probably because of the subject matter. But no, for me, networking is key. As people are really suffering, and we've got this obsession at the moment with ChatGPT and AI and the robotics, everything that's virtual, being human and creating serendipity through human connections and human networking, to me, is going to be even more important soon, if it's not now. So I absolutely would urge anybody to do that, and if you're just to keep doing that and keep building it in, because as I've said before, if you look at the crisis, the cost of living crisis, all the different challenges, one of the things that really does bring us out of ourselves is just meeting people, just speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you sort of coach your people on your program to go out and network themselves? Like what kind of tips do you give them?
Yeah, so we have the program is chunked into 3 phases. They get ready, get set, and get smart. The get ready bit is really the kind of everything I talked about, just understanding them. And in that get ready bit, we're saying to them that they need to get ready. And we put networking in that, because we're saying, actually, for you to get ready, you need to start seeing how you behave with people. So the first rule for me networking is to approach someone and just see the things you do, and just how they respond to you. And you learn things. If you stand too close to someone, they're constantly backing away. There's just things like that. And I just get people to be very self-aware, and just start mirroring people. So if somebody is is sitting down, sit down. Don't stand above them. If they stand up, you stand up. If they generally are, I don't know, sitting a certain way, make sure that they're comfortable. So lots of things I talk about. It's just really, really good in terms of just emotional and kind of emotional intelligence, and kind of just understanding a bit of self-analysis and reflection. And the other thing is, obviously, it's good to meet people. Your network is really about there's lots of intelligence and insight from just going to events and meeting people. So I would say pick events where you are going to learn something, you're going to be able to take away things, and then you've got the delegate list. I always say to them, keep the delegate list, and those are the people you send your CV, and mention that I met you at this event. It'd be great if you could actually meet them, but you may say, I saw you speak, or I saw this. And people like that kind of connection and that context. So yeah, we build it in terms of your employability and making sure you're getting ready for work.
Yeah, I think it's a muscle you have to keep practicing and get that muscle memory with as well. It's like, it probably feels really horrible and daunting on the first go, but the more you get out there and do it, the better you're going to be. So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So you are also non-exec director of Birmingham Tech. Now the West Midlands has such a huge, vast tech community. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your role with them?
Yeah, so it was a. I know Yanis, who set up Birmingham Tech a number of years ago. We were all really excited when he, a few years ago when he said he was going to do it, and I was just one of the people, I suppose, that was true. I was involved in the innovation ecosystem at the time, still am. But I just wanted to help him, and in doing so, we became, connected in that way. A lot of the people that were helping him to bring it together in the first couple of years. So I was very, delighted and very humbled actually to be asked to be one of the non-exec directors. And I've tried to give some direction and to be a continual ambassador and kind of supporter of Birmingham Tech. It's just changed its name now. It's just had the West Midlands Tech review was this week. So it's now changed to West Midlands Tech, or Tech West Midlands, which makes good sense. So to your point, the scene, if you like, has grown. The ecosystem is bigger. There are the focus in terms of the amount of digital jobs, the amount of companies that are recognizing with the numbers of universities and the numbers of digital graduates, and people who are kind of excited and interested in digital tech and technology in general. I think it's going in the right direction. I do, as you can imagine, worry about the people who are not able to get in and participate. So the equity of that and the how I think there needs to be more on-ramps for people to get involved and start to just play with technology. So I think what's missing is probably a sandpit or some kind of playground where people can play with tech. It's still, for me, it feels a little bit like a country club or a golf course or somewhere that only the people who know people are playing. I think young children should be playing at this stuff, but not in a school necessarily, but they should be able to go to their high street or their nearest playground and start playing with tech. And Birmingham Tech should be then pulling those people towards them, not in a weird way, but you know what I mean, just kind of building on that excitement and that interest, and then connecting them with opportunities to kind of come up with ideas that may solve problems. And in that way, they could become entrepreneurs and certainly become excited and join companies that where they can add value. So I think there's more to be done at the grassroots level for sure.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of momentum at the minute, but yeah, like you said, it's about opening it up to everybody and making it more equitable. Does your role as one of the founding members of the Race Equalities Task Force kind of cross over with that at all? Do you bring your tech side of things into that?
Yes. Yeah. So the Race Equalities Task Force for me, I was really, I suppose, skeptical when I heard Andy Street talk about, the mayor talk about setting up a race equalities task force. It was one of his pledges when he, in his election manifesto. Skeptical on the basis that I've been asked to be part of those kinds of organizations before. They don't generally do anything. There's no impact. But then the chair was chosen, which was Yatunda Danya. I know her, really admired her. She's a brilliant leader. I think Andy's a great leader. What he did at John Lewis was super impressive, and he talks commercial, talks business, so the language of business. So between those two conversations, I decided to apply. It was a formal application process. I joined, and I've been really, really encouraged and remain encouraged and motivated to build the kind of on-ramps we're talking about, the kind of equity but at the systemic and policy level. So lots of policies are enacted that are not thinking, they're not culturally fluent. They're not thinking of all the different voices. I really don't like the phrase, the acronym BAME, because it doesn't make any sense. Black people are, there are lots of types of black people, African, Caribbean, all the different flavors, Asian, all of those. So to lump them together as a collective doesn't make any sense. So that building that culture of fluency, that understanding and listening, so, and networking and connecting with people, all the things I've been doing my whole career, I think I can bring a lot of that to the Race Equalities Task Force. I'm yeah, I'm involved with it, and it's something that's really taking on a life of its own for me. And I'm not going to say excited, but I am very encouraged about what I've seen, and the commitment is real from Andy Street and the partnership board of local authorities. Yeah, I'm feeling very positive about it, certainly right now.
So at the end of everybody's interviews, I'm asking 3 questions. So the first one is, what is one piece of advice you wish you'd been given at the start of your career?
What a good question. Save more money. Yeah. No, yes, I don't know if that's true. I think it would be, don't be so hard on yourself. So, and that means if I don't, I just felt like any mistake I made was the end. So if I got in a job and I didn't do well, I mean, I've been fired probably 3 times in my life. I remember them all. I remember the conversations. It was the worst feeling in the world. And I just left. I remember thinking, oh, I can't tell my dad. It was just, I just felt horrible. And of course, it wasn't the end of the world. And actually, I learned a lot from those moments, because I did reflect on them and think, well, actually, yeah, I can see why they did that. So, yeah, but yeah, probably not to be so hard on myself.
It sounds like that's probably quite a defining conversation for your entire career as well, and how you've ended up doing what you're doing. So there we go. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
That's true, actually. Thank you for that. That's true.
Okay. What's one book or podcast or talk you've heard recently that you'd like to recommend to everyone?
Ooh. I reread. So I reread The Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela, only because, there's another book, but I'm going to talk about this one because it circled around to back to this book, because I even more so now, the Truth and Reconciliation committees that he set up, I absolutely believe, with regard to race and race equality and this topic of race, I think we need that kind of approach. I think I just wanted to re-energize, reimagine his life and what was all happened to him before that, and then what happened when he was released, and then he became president, and then created those committees that gave the people who had perpetrated the things, the bad things and some of the horrible things, the opportunity to just unpack and unload the guilt and what happened, and for people to listen to them and recognize them as real people, that these weren't, they're not bad people necessarily, but they did some things that will never leave them. And I do think that that was the book. I've reread the book, and it really did make me just even more convinced that we just need some truth and reconciliation, to give people the opportunity to say, okay, not in any conflict situation, not with any recrimination. So the point is, the point is giving yourself a break, which I mentioned before. I think people need to be able to give themselves a break and say, okay, that happened. I wouldn't do it again. It was a horrible thing, but it doesn't. That's not all I am. There is a possibility for me to repair some of that if I can.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like, obviously, with everything you do, that's really important. But also in the kind of culture we're in at the minute, where there's a lot of cancel culture and people are being held to account for things that they may have made mistakes years ago, but they're still being lambasted for them and things, and not given the chance to repent or to hold their hands up. It's a really important message, isn't it? Is that we are human and people do make mistakes. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. Okay, and one person who has inspired your career or inspired you throughout your career?
I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do 2. So the first person is my dad, and my dad and I, and anybody that knows me or would say that's odd, because my dad and I had a really challenging relationship. he was always the line that I couldn't cross, and the wall that I couldn't climb over, but also the test of me as a person and anything I've achieved. It wasn't kind of real or valid unless my dad said okay, because he must have said that 3 times in his entire life, to me anyway. But he did. I've become so much like him in the way that I assess myself and my life and treat others. He was so resilient and steadfast, and if you said something and you committed to something, his view was that's it. That's now you've committed, and so it has to be done. So don't commit to anything you can't deliver. You're not intending to go. And excuses, there's no excuse for success, he used to say. So it's only failure that you make excuses for. So, so that was interesting. And the second person is probably less, a little bit more distant, but it's so I have a vague relationship, if you like, or a real affinity for Barack Obama. And it's for all, and I know, I can see, why lots of people, are drawn to him. But for me, I understood, because of the life I've led, the decisions I've made, the decision, the fork in the road that he came to when he, and anybody, I don't know how much you know about his life, but the point when he, was in Chicago, he just met Michelle. I think they were just, getting married, and he was going to be a lawyer. She was a lawyer, and their careers, and he's just started to get involved with politics. The fork in the road that he took, where he just went left when I went right. I got to the same fork in the road, and I could have, I've always been the kind of person I'm good with people. I can explain myself. I talked to you about that, but I didn't have the fortitude or the confidence to get to serve in the way that he did. And I really, really, that resonates with me so much, and what he's had to endure by making that choice, and the impact that he's had and continues to have. So he inspires me every day. I just listen to some of the things he says, and his family and his children, and the way they live their lives. It is just, just inspirational.
I think even with the TV shows they're putting out on Netflix, there's just a really good positive agenda behind everything they put out, isn't there? So
yeah, I think, that's why I said there'll be people split on that, and you can see there's money involved in this. There's some stuff going on, but I think I agree with you. I genuinely believe that, and because this has been a repeating thing, and I think I'm very honest about. So I was listening to Michelle Obama's. I think she did something with Oprah recently. Her end of one of her tours or something, or another book that she's releasing. And I watched that the other day, and I thought, and she said, there was years when she was really angry. She hated her husband because he dragged her into all sorts of things. And I think that's super honest, but I can absolutely get that. But so I genuinely believe he must have been, because in the face of your wife not liking you so much, and you did it anyway. Yeah, I get that. So he was genuinely, committed to serve. And I think that word serve and service. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to do with my life now is to serve. I think doing that changes the dynamic. It just puts you on the other end of these conversations, and you understand the challenge better when you're serving. You're trying to be in service of people.
Yeah, I think you're doing a pretty good job of it. So well done.
Thanks. I hope so.
So if people want to find out more about you and your work and TIN Ventures, where can they find you?
Yeah, there's a website, but probably LinkedIn is probably the best place. I'm on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to find. But yeah, just contact me. I'm pretty responsive to people if they message me. I try to, as we've talked about, I try to be accessible and and I'm always open to having a conversation, especially if it's in service to the things I'm doing. So if you want to get my attention, then just say, I want to help people. I especially want to help people get into digital or innovation or entrepreneurship, then you've definitely got my attention, and I'll definitely connect. So yeah, always happy to connect with people. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the easiest way.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much, Alex. I've really appreciated everything you said today, and I feel like I've learned so much as well about emotional intelligence and trust and all that kind of stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Really, really, yeah, been a pleasure. Thanks for all the questions. Some of them were tough.